All right, let's jump into it. It's 3 past 10 on 27th of Feb, so Friday, and it is the last day of the month as well, last day of the trading month as well. So see if we get any of these sort of supposed US dollar buying sort of flows sort of coming through, and see if that can sort of like weigh on the metals a little bit more. I'll start off with silver here today actually, instead of sort of going straight for the gold, but just because this kind of thing, like we had this negative divergence, which came up into this resistance zone, and yeah, I've come to the pretty much to the conclusion at the moment, sort of with the negative divergence. What I'm looking for now is basically into a resistance zone, so negative divergence plus resistance. As you can see, there's obviously a resistance area here previously, and a double kick. So none of these sort of like, I mean, like this is a good sort of single negative divergence here. We can see it's down and then up, and then sort of like obviously boom started to work its way back down over here. But more recently, I've seen a few of these sort of things here. It wasn't really a massive negative divergence at this point, but it was happening. But this second kick turning over from 80 seems to be when you're kind of wanting to sort of jump on the sort of short side of it. And obviously we got that little move through yesterday. So the big question with this sort of stuff at the moment is like, because, everybody was building up to this, like, oh, Iran, US conflict. They've got all the aircraft carriers over there, and it's going to be the big sort of thing. Are they going to bomb them? And so some people saying they're just going to give them a little bit of bombing just to keep them on their toes. And I'm like, okay, maybe. I don't look. I know nothing about the military actions, but to me that kind of seems a bit counterintuitive. I mean, like, yeah, they bombed him when was it, like June or something last year, anyway. So I don't think they've got any misconceptions of their capabilities. Anyway, whatever. Point is that sort of it really sort of boiled out to a whole lot of nothing. It sort of seems that it wasn't negative. So if it's not negative, I'll say it's a positive, in the sense that they're saying, okay, look, that's cool. Let's continue the talks. I think that's a positive. Um, we did see metals rally into the end of the session though, and I think that's probably sort of more to do with the dollar yet again sort of selling back from that resistance point. But that's surely going to come to a make or break period in any day now, kind of thing. It's coming to the sort of apex, the little point, the tippy part, the pointy part of the triangle. But anyway, let's get on with silver. So the point is we had this sort of negative divergence into the resistance here. We got a sell down, tested supports. Okay, that's fine. This is where we had yesterday's target through this level here. You can see that there's actually a little bit of a zone I just drew with that little line there, but that's your zone through here. You want to get a close underneath here. Get rid of this thing for now. That's not really going to weigh too much. I would say this, and if you actually sort of drag this across, that's also this, as you can see, the very tip of these highs over here. Give or take a couple of points. Depends how fat. I don't like the zones being too fat. But what you want to see here is a close underneath this zone, and you're going to see this. Like, to me, it doesn't. It feels like, okay, bang, bang, bang. All right, we're going down. One last little oomph up, and then if we come down and close down underneath here, I could see probably a fairly decent little sell-off. And if we look at sort of how these things sort of happened, like when this thing was rolling over this time here, not necessarily going to get a big massive candle down like this, but as you can see, so we had the negative divergence, sold down, had that little dip down, bought straight back up to kind of hold whatever that zone would have been, and then a dribble, 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 and then a set like that kind of closed down underneath here. That's where you'd be looking for, and then obviously bang, away it goes. So if we try to sort of pick out where these sort of points would be here, obviously, you've got your sell down here, which would be your sell down here, bounce back up. This is where we would currently be at the moment if this is to sort of replicate, because we had a little sort of move up to the top of the negative divergence over here. So down, up, get those last lot of people in here, and if we get the close down underneath, where's that little drawing box thing gone? If we get a close down underneath here, I think that's pretty much going to be something that opens up to, as I said, not necessarily going to see a massive sell-off down here, but to me it kind of feels like it's more likely that this is kind of a little bounce on the way to continue this kind of move coming down here, opposed to it just going zip and then shooting back up over here. That's just my feeling with the structure and the sort of setup of this chart here at the moment. So make this a little down candle. And so a close, let's give it a bit, but say a close 85, 85.30. Obviously, the lower the better for the confirmation. But a close around this area over here, to me, is going to signal that we're probably going to be coming down. I'd be surprised if this level here holds. Look, I'll keep it there just for the sake of sort of having a previous level in which the market has reacted to. But it kind of just chops straight through it on the way up over here. So I don't know if they're necessarily still going to regard this one. So we'll see how this goes. Another thing that I did actually notice as well is if you drag this as your little sort of could be a little bit of a support. We've also got an underside test here. Let's get this off. We do have like a little support, only really two, but this is your breakout kind of thing. Here you go, boof. It's up underneath it. It's also reacting to the underside here. So again, sort of break, bounce, retest the underside, which is, I've covered this a lot recently in that with these angles, how these things sort of, they never sort of, you don't just break and then go down like a stone. Generally, you'll get that retest of the underside, and then it's the lower low, the third part of the move. I mean, it's the same thing every single time. Down find support, up find resistance, tackle these lows, take out the lows, and then away it goes. That's how we'll sort of see a downside move with silver here. So yeah, I'd be cautious sort of buying it up around here. I've opened this starter short to sort of see if we can sort of get something a little bit more substantial sort of coming to the downside here. I guess sort of all things considered with this as well is that if this does decide to somehow go up over here, well, I mean, I guess a close above 92. Anywhere around here, you've got these little sort of early rejections, you've got the bigger wick rejection over here. Yeah, I'm not looking for upside. Should this thing sort of come up, should this thing sort of come through 92.50, 92.50, 93, then okay, yeah, maybe we see some ongoing stuff, but breaking that trend, negative divergence, what's the daily look like? Daily's overbought. Yeah, as you can see, look, really a close down underneath here. A bit of a speed hump maybe around this area through here, like these sort of 83 to 84 area. That could offer a little bit of a sort of a point of interest. But otherwise, it was a very quick move up. And as you can see, sort of like once you get to these things, charts like to replicate. And if you sort of look at this area through here and here, it hasn't really stopped much. Like, it's not like this kind of sort of choppy kind of price action like this going through it. Charts like to replicate what they've seen previously. And as you can see, sort of like if we sort of get down between here and between sort of 84.30 and 79, that's just straight down, straight up. Yeah, there was a bit of chop through here, I suppose, but straight down, straight up, straight down. You know what I mean? Like it's, yeah, I would say it opens up a fair bit. So that would be your sort of second leg if you get a close down underneath this area over here. What's this? Sort of close under 83, 83.70. All right, moving on with gold. One sec. All right, and so gold again, sort of really tightening up. It's got the breakout that everybody was looking for. Everyone was like, "Oh, look, here we go, here we go." They got this big sort of 5,200. It's going up to the highs and all this kind of thing. And I think a lot of this, because remember, this is only last Wednesday. We were trading at 4,800. We saw a big move up here, and just so happens to come prior to this whole Iran situation or meeting, and everyone's like, "Oh, what if they're about to bomb and they're about to bomb and what if they're about to bomb and we better get some gold?" And as I said, the talks kind of fizzled so far to a bit of nothing. Like it wasn't resolved. Like if it was resolved, gold would be down through, through 5K or so. So it's still elevated and it bounced back up, but it's not up at sort of 54 because it didn't, didn't sort of kick off. Hey, let's have more talks. Look, the chart perfectly represents how those talks went. Talks went good down here. Talks went bad up here. We'll come back next week, which is what they're doing, and charts kind of effectively in the middle there. So I think sort of like the fact that everyone really sort of positioned themselves for this big sort of like potential military operation, and then that hasn't happened. I think that is kind of weighed on gold here. But I think certainly, these are your sort of like your direction lines here for sure. This is on the daily. A close, whoops, put you down there, and then a close up here. That's going to give you a direction, in my opinion, in that. And I wouldn't say you have to wait for the daily for these kind of closes. But if you get onto the lower time frame, let's just clean this up a bit. You're down, that's an up. Ah, this one here. So yeah, we can just sort of drill down onto the 4 hour and have a little bit of a look here. So if you looked at yesterday's analysis, I know it kind of sort of charts and lines everywhere. This is my these two little red lines were what my call was for yesterday. You move up, you're going to be sold into it. You move down, you're going to be bought up. And what did it do? Moved up, sold into it. Then this came, sold down, bought back up into it. Just chop city, mate. And so let's get that out of the way because that was then. And we could sort of say, hey, look, what are we actually looking at here? Because we got a bit of a trend. If we sort of clean this up a little bit, put you on here, you on here. I think that is something that you'd want to, as a bull, see it hold. But again, these sort of things with an angle, you want the swing low, which is again, this is this weekly chart here, this weekly, sorry, this daily level that I just marked out a second ago. So realistically, a close underneath 50.80, I think is again going to put you back down, and you're going to start playing in this area down here. It doesn't mean you're necessarily coming back to 48. We've got some speed humps in the way. For instance, let's put a little zone through here. Plus, of course, you've got your psychological level of 5,000 there as well. Let's make this a purple zone here. So I would say sort of like, let's get this out of the way, 78% with that fib as well, just for the point of it. But as you can see, this is just moving along here. Again, sorry, it's about sort of six thoughts in one here. But all right, take it one by one. Close underneath here. I think there's a good chance that maybe you're sort of going to be coming back to these kind of levels over here around sort of 5,020 to 49.60. Look, there's also the chance that you do see a little bit of a leg up because again, look, it wasn't resolved, so it is still there. It's just if that was the big catalyst, which is what we saw through here. Yes, there was the tariff kind of thing going on. Overnight as well, I think middle of the night, but I'm pretty sure I saw some sort of headline about the Cuban Coast Guard shooting some boats or something, and it was American citizens on them. I don't know. It was middle of the night, and I was just like, okay, this doesn't sound great. Um, but because of course, they're simmering, simmering in the background of the 30 irons that the US have in the fire is, Cuba. Wasn't that sort of something a couple of weeks ago that they were talking about potentially sort of taking over them or something as well? Anyway, point is, if this was the driver to sort of position yourself for it to happen, it didn't happen, well, you take a few positions off. And I think that's why we saw a little bit of a sell down there. As to sort of it bouncing back up, I mean, look, right now it's just dead in the center here. So you can't really sort of think, even if you sort of put a little zone in it, say, 51.60, 51.55 or whatever, you still got this level down here to sort of really combat with. So I think to have true sort of direction on this, as I said, top side, you need to take out these highs over here. But I think this is at a premium for the idea that they were going to bomb each other, or US were going to bomb or whatever. That didn't happen. So I think this is a little bit sort of like you got people that are long that are trapped over here. I still think that the idea of a roll down is probably more likely, but we'll see how it goes. It's pretty flat for the open here, so we'll see how these sort of things sort of pan out. 4 hours a bit oversold. It's tipping up here a little bit, but again, look, it's just very, very choppy here. Look above sort of like maybe Look, even as you run into the headaches either side of this, it's a very tough call to make here at the moment. You wouldn't even sort of say necessarily that this is um, true sort of consolidation. Maybe do something like this. That's not too bad. It's fairly symmetrical. Well, it's broken this first trend here, but again, it's got this bigger one down underneath. So almost sort of disregard this a little bit here. Say that this is our little triangle. Yeah, but again, swing high, swing low. That's where you're going for direction. It's just a very tough call with gold, and I think that the chart up and down, choppy with wicks on either side of it, and more or less flat for a couple of days, perfectly sort of represents that. And just sort of before sort of moving on, I think really sort of need to look for other keys for what this may sort of be doing here at the moment, because of course, like Iran was the big driver as to sort of what the market's looking for, and then it's like, oh, okay, it didn't happen. What is gold's just a little bit stuck. Like, what do I do with myself now? My feeling is we bought a little bit of it, or the market bought a bit more gold than it probably needed, and that just in preparation. That hasn't happened. I feel the sort of move is okay, well, let's just take it off a little bit. You can put it back on, sort of leading into the next round of talks, but I think sort of non-bombing is kind of a positive and means you don't need to have the pressure on for the upside as much at the moment. That's just my feeling with it all. But you know, it's chops at a hit. So look, it could sort of go through further. Of course, it's not the only driver. And this is why I think sort of paying attention to the dollar is really key here, because the dollar is absolutely screaming at a potential breakout, but it just fails time and time again. And as you can get onto the super low time frames, every time the dollar has tried to break out, we've seen metals plummet, then the dollar fails, metals come back very strong. Put it side by side so you can sort of actually get an idea of this. So, you know, the little candles sort of line up. Oh, sorry, the candles line up, the little dotted lines. But look at the sort of the bounce back here. Actually, hold on, won't they both move on this one here, did they? Yeah. But anyway, look, this is the dollar on the right here, testing that zone again, pushes back down, metals push back up towards the highs. Yeah, I mean, this was, where are we at over here? This was a dollar trying to break out the other night. Attempt, you know, prior to it, gold coming down. And then as soon as it was sort of like the metal selling off, down, coming back down here, sorry, metal selling off, dollar selling off down here, you see gold pushing back up over here. So I think sort of really this is where the attention needs to be for a bit of confirmation, because that Iran situation is really just kind of, it's in no man's land. So you can't really sort of say, hey, look, do we buy more on the idea that they may attack when they already haven't attacked? If that makes sense. It's kind of like, you know, people have bought up the premium prior to it all. It didn't happen. Well, what do? Buy more? No, you probably just hold on to what you've got, or you sort of reduce your exposure a little bit, hence a little bit of downside. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Get back onto one chart. Move on to the dollar. As I said, the dollar is absolutely screaming at this level over here. It's 98. We've been touting it for ages now, since we were back up over here. And we're like, this will be the area, bang, and then no, failed, failed. But it is really pushing towards this ascending triangle here. As you can see, sort of came very close to sort of a little touch up here yesterday. And one thing I've noticed, I put a post on X yesterday. 6 o'clock is like the time when they turn on the dollar buying machine. Um, so this was 6 o'clock on Wednesday, so London pre, and it just shot up to the top side here. This was 6 o'clock here on last night, and as you can see, shot it up here. They did actually find a little bit of resistance on this point. I actually just dragged this across just then, so we could see that obviously this has been playing sort of playing both sides here. So it's a little resistance, a little support. It's been the support back over here. So I think this is in the immediate. You'd like to see this level here hold. That sell down of this rejection here. This is another thing as well that I sort of noticed. This sell down here came to the 78%. So yesterday's video was like, oh look, and we'll see what happens at this level here. Is around that 68. Open up right on it, dip down, back up in there, and then just a bit nothingness and that going around over here, and powered through and sort of pushed back up. So 78%. It's very deep, sort of with the pullback. But as you can see, like when they sort of sold this thing down here, it really sort of like got a pretty big hammer here. True, maybe it ran out of time. What time did this happen? This is coming from 5 o'clock. This is coming from 1 o'clock. So maybe they had a few more hours to sort of continue this thing down here. So maybe this little bit here is only just where we are here, and we still have more downside here. But my feeling with these is surely this, like, I mean, how many times can you can you do it and then sort of rip it back up? So, and this is what I'm saying. I think we're really going to get to a resolution soon, whereas we're either going to get a big sort of break and it's going to power out through this 6800, power through this sort of 98 level, or we're going to get a break, a failed break at too many attempts here, because these are coming in, I suppose. No, these ones are a little bit even, but you know, still can't quite get up to that line just above 98 over there. Look, ascending triangles, which is the largest sort of structure that we do have like this, is a positive. Yeah, I mean, you can see buyers moving up, buyers moving up, buyers moving up. The idea being that here are the sellers, the sellers, the sellers, sellers. Like the sellers aren't really pushing it down. Yeah, you got like it's coming down by a couple of points or whatever over here, but the sellers aren't sort of pushing down like they did here. You know, that's the sell to continue for the dollar to sell down. You want to see the sellers moving in that kind of fashion. You're not seeing that. Well, at the moment, you're not seeing that anyway. And the buyers are sort of pushing up. So, you know, eventually, the idea being eventually that this level here of the market that wants to sell it will run out of ammo. You know what I mean? You can't sort of, well, not you can't, these people have got a lot of money, of course, but, you know, we're talking about the whole market here, but, and also, of course, this is the DXY, so it's a basket, but regardless of all that, the way that a chart works is that sort of idea that if you have a straight line, there's only so many people that want to sell it at that, and they're obviously not showing that they want to push it lower, hence the buyer's ability to push up and test that level time and time again. So, you know, eventually sort of like, you know, if the buyers keep pressing and pressing and pressing, it should pop to the top side. No, nothing's 100%. Hence, you know, definitely got the idea that things can fail down out this way. But that's your kind of direction that we're sort of going to see. And as you can see, we're kind of running out of space here. So, you know, how many more times can they sort of do it with a little sell down, buy up, sell down, buy up? I think we're going to get a sort of resolution pretty quickly. But, you know, 97.30 for the swing low. Look, if it does fail, it's not completely over, but this is kind of what you'd expect. You'd expect probably fail here, bounce here, most likely going to lead to a fail like that, if it does fail. Um, Potential for it to just go, yeah, whatever, let's go into a range like that. Most likely, that's not base case for a sort of fail. If it fails through this line here, that's probably your first course of action that it's actually going to sell off. Saving grace would be if they turn it into a range where they just have basically, you know, give us a little bit more time to think about it. Consider it like that, because this is obviously a pretty important zone for them as well. And then, you know, there's still potential for the thing to sort of move out. It's just a bit more of a question mark, or they break it through and they get a big move out to the top side and they get something to this effect and move up over there. That's probably my base case. I do think, as I said, ascending triangle, putting the pressure on this level here, it does lead to the idea that you're breaking through. You're seeing a little bit of a change in the sort of way sort of the market's talking about the US as well. You know, they've been sort of going on about sort of like, oh, sell America trade and the economy stuff for so long that if you read the headlines and hear how people, the commenters talk about it, that's changed a little bit and they're not so dirty on it. One thing that does make me question is the yields. The yields got absolutely pulverized. That's not looking good. And generally, the 10-year, you want to see it moving up and have that sort of dollar strength. I mean, that's, you know, pretty much sort of like, you know, the go-to with these sort of things. But let's just have a look. Is it Aussie? How's the Aussie? Okay, so maybe it's a global thing. I mean, let's have a look. EU 10, is it? So it's a Euro bonds. Yeah, okay, maybe it's more of a just a global thing opposed to a US thing. And what I mean by that is that sort of like, yeah, you want obviously your yields moving in the right direction, but if the yields are all selling off everywhere, then it's kind of like, well, it makes it a bit more of an even playing field. It's not like okay, as you saw a second ago, the euro, uh, the euro yields are going through the roof, but the US ones are being sold off. No, they're both being sold off. So it means you can't really necessarily just rely on that because it's both you're both in a bad situation in terms of sort of yields. So I don't know if that's necessarily what you can use to trade, but I did notice that and it made me sort of question it a little bit. But anyway, point being is that it is coming to a little bit of an apex of this sort of thing here. I think we're going to get a resolution pretty quickly, but certainly a close above 98 or a close below 97, 97.30, 97.20 should give us direction. All right, just writing up the notes of this at the same time as we go. So yeah, look, I think this is probably going to give us a pretty close, sort of a bit of a resolution. So this is the 4 hour. Look, obviously pretty swift sort of rejection on the move over here, but as you can see, it keeps fighting its way back, and as it comes into these things, it's coming in strong. I mean, look at this buying coming in here, or this buying coming in here. There's got to be some sort of reason that they keep hammering it up and hammering it up, and it looks so good every time. You're like, ah, here we go. Surely it's going to go through, and boom, here we go, we fail. So look, I mean, in the short term, yeah, look, maybe you hold this zone here, but if it doesn't hold, I wouldn't be sort of too crazy on it. That's about the 50% of that move through yesterday from yesterday's lows. Um, let's just make this a little bit thinner. Yeah, if look, we saw this one come back to the 78. Yeah, look, it's pretty much, as you can see, I get a little bit lost for words because the market is just such a choppy place at the moment, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's favoring a breakout to the top side, but there's arguments for both sides of these things, and very strong arguments, as there typically are arguments for both, but very much it could very much break both ways. So anyway, let's move on. We've got Aussie. This is the Aussie chart here. So this is the play yesterday to sort of move up. It didn't quite get up to that sort of 71.40 resistance level, but this is what I was saying. If you look at the video yesterday, I was like, look, if you get up around here, you kind of either want to be booking your longs or catching your short side here. And as we could see, boom, really opened up a fair bit to sort of come down here. Let's get this stuff out of here for now. And again, it's just testing, it's showing itself. It is not very comfortable up above 71 cents. I mean, this was a fairly decent sell down. So, that's about sort of 60, 70 points or so in that move down there. Like gold, it sort of bounced up here and, everything sort of bounced back. It actually bounced back very quickly and then sort of second move. And so two bounces back up there. Look, for the time being, it is holding above 71 cents, or it's actually right on 71 cents at the moment, but this little zone over here. So I think for it to sort of stay in this top area here, you probably would want to confirm that this is still buy zone. Um, so hold above 70, 90 because a little bit of an overshoot. 90 seems to be a bit of a reoccurring number for the Aussie there. But if it can hold here, then okay, we could see something to that effect. But I would say sort of close underneath 70, 90. Realistically, your first target's back to this midway point. I covered this the other day when you have these ranges that you'll have a midway point. As you can see, market jumped straight back in here. So that'll be your first target for a downside underneath sort of 70, 90. So you'd be looking for sort of 70, 70. But a close underneath 70, 70, you're right back down to the bottom of the range again. And then you're actually looking at a larger kind of double top, which, double tops then, that's actually got larger implications for a downside move if something of this sort. Down here. So you take the high to the swing down to the high. I mean, this went a little bit lower here, but as you can see, that's about the average of the pullback there. And then you take that distance from there to there, you drag that down from there to there, and where does it take us? Right back to that previous buy zone down 69.40. So I do think, and as I said, you can't just look at one thing here, but if the metals come off, if the dollar breaks out, well, Aussie's showing that they've got some nice little targets that it can run to as well for the downside. um, should you get down underneath these levels. Obviously, you've got sort of points of interest here at 70, 90, 70, 70, but certainly break of 70, 30. We've seen this little tiny little sort of support actually held up like a champ there, but that's really opening up, and you're coming back down towards sort of 69 over here. This is on the idea that the dollar breaks out, and this is what I've been saying, sort of with the Aussie dollar particularly, because it's very strong from its local data and central bank outlook at the moment. Like the RBA is very hawkish. We've got CPI still coming in hot, very like above everybody else. So there's a lot of arguments for the Aussie to be the place to be for the dollar for the buyers should the market want to sell the dollar. You know what I mean? It looks more attractive and hence outperforms like maybe the pound or the euro and these kind of things. I mean, it's right at its highs. I mean, look at where Aussie is here, pushing at its respective highs, and then you have a look at the euro. Well, that's hardly sort of pushing at its respective highs. You see what I mean? And this is the thing, because if you're not going to be buying the US dollar, what do you want to be buying? Well, you want to be buying something with a hawkish sounding central bank, and somebody who's like saying, hey, look, you know what? We're going to hike, and we're probably going to hike a little bit more, and all this kind of stuff. Where's the Aussie gone? And hence why Aussie is right up the top of its respective moves. You see what I mean? It's sort of like, it's not, and nothing's, these things aren't one to one. Aussie was very much lagging all through 2025. So I do still think it has upside here, but I'm open to the idea of a pretty deep sort of correction should the dollar break out, should the metal sell off. That'd be the sort of scenario for Aussie here. But anyway, look, short term, see what happens at 70, 90. That's the first point. But again, if you sort of fail from here, and then you've got a little midway here, but I would say that's probably your test back down here at 70, 30. Underneath there, you've got double top in play, which really opens up to 69.30. All right, and these things, I've tried to do these things a bit quicker. It's still 30 minutes of rabbiting on here. So we did get that pullback very nicely on Aussie yen here. Um, so, geez, look, it's a bit tough to sort of keep on top of all the stuff going on over there, but just to break down the last couple of things we had, Tashiati, whatever, the PM over here sort of saying, hey, look, you know what, I'm going to question if we're going to put any more hikes in. Bang, yen gets smashed. Appoints two new people to the board, both doves. Boom, yen gets smashed. Carries on, carries on. Particularly with this pair as well. Well, I mean, it was yen across the board, but particularly with this pair as well. Um, yen just weakened across the board a bit with Aussie. As I've said a couple of times, we've got the hawkish sounding central bank, and that's the conflict, not the conflict, the divergence between the two central banks. This is the result of it. Anyway, the point is that we got the sort of pullback down here. We had some hawkish comments from the BOJ, sort of saying, hey, look, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. And the market sort of, okay, maybe we are a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So the idea was to come back to this zone here. As you can see, it came back, bounced pretty good with it all there. It's not looking particularly healthy this morning, though. So I think it moved back down underneath 10.40, a close down underneath here, I think could give us a little bit of a deeper correction. So let's just whack this down here and put a down candle on this one. Yeah, a little close underneath here. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a bit of a, hey, time in the sun, not ready for it, boom, and we see a little bit of a sort of pullback down over here. Again, like, if we see these other sort of, if we see the dollar run and that, we may see, the flows of capital go to other places. So the idea is sort of like, despite the yen being so incredibly weak due to the monetary fiscal policies. Anyway, the BOJ basically just having a very sort of overall dovish outlook of it all. The yen at its heart is a safe haven currency. Despite it being super weak, it is, if you sort of say, okay, what are the characteristics of the currencies? Like the Aussie is a risk currency. So risk on, you buy Aussie. Risk off, you buy typically US dollar, Swiss franc, and the yen and gold. But in this scenario, if the market's still in a risk off, so you won't be buying Aussie, but if metals sell off, Well, you've got risk off, but the flows aren't going into metals. So they may look for the other safe havens, US dollar, yen. So if the market's risk off, you're not buying Aussie. If you're selling off gold, even though you risk off, because gold can really play both sides, risk on and risk off, we've seen in the last year. So markets are looking for safe haven currencies. Well, maybe they look for the yen and maybe they look for the US dollar. Maybe we see Aussie dollar come down towards those 69 cents. Maybe we see the yen strengthen up a little bit across the board and sort of pull back down into these levels over here as well. Look, the thing is still ultimately very bullish, but that's just the scenario that we could sort of see. And this is why, you need to use a couple of these charts at the same time to sort of get an idea of sort of where the flows of capital are going across the market. Anyway, that's the scenario that I'm kind of looking for if we do see that sort of combination, metal selling off and market still in a risk off kind of mode. We could see what are the equity markets doing here? Do it over here somewhere? Oh, yeah, here we go. More or less a whole bunch of nothing, nothing, but I guess a little bit of a pull down here. What's Russell doing? Russell's a small cap, so whatever. This is Nikkei. A little bit of a pullback there. Anyway, point being is that if this continues here, that looks not particularly super healthy. Disregard this wick. I don't think that's real. I think that's a chart fabrication. That doesn't look particularly great. Negative divergence on the Nikkei. And Nikkei, very strong indicator. Indicator sort of very strong sort of inverse relationship with the yen. Think about it like sort of when people say I'm going to cash in the US. Well, it's exactly the same thing with the yen, and that's why it's seen as a sort of risk-off currency as well. But if the Nikkei has this negative divergence that plays out through here, so if we come down through this zone, put a little alert on it. So if the Nikkei has a negative divergence, and we see that play out, Nikkei down, yen up, yen strength, risk off, because this is the market that kind of, can really kind of dictate things. If we see the Nikkei coming off, it's generally not going to be standalone. Like, we're going to see the other markets probably tend to come off there a little bit as well. So that means you go out of the stock market, you go into the yen, which then pushes strength into the yen, which gives us our break to the downside here. Again, look, I'm not looking necessarily like that's where I keep sort of thinking maybe it'll come back down over here, but that's not my sort of time frame in which I trade. This is the kind of thing that I'm sort of looking for, potentially some short-term pull to the downside here. But yeah, I think sort of a close underneath 110 here. This thing looks like it wants to probably come back down towards that 109.70s. All right, anyway, that's it from me.